where in India are all these wealthy people coming from?
70 to 75% of the luxury business comes out of the north and the west. Raipur, Indore, Jaipur, Surat, Ahmedabad, Hyderabad has picked up quite a bit.
So which are some of the bucket list trips that you're saying that people are wanting to experience?
Definitely Scandinavia. There's a butterfly migration that happens in Mexico.
Which no one really knows about.
Yeah. Or there is the gathering that happens in Sri Lanka where 300 plus elephants come together in June, July, August. I think there is the ice festival in Sapporo that happens in February.
What's the maximum amount that a client has spent with you when going on one of these trips?
Anywhere between $500,000 to $750,000, which is a week-long trip.
The rising dollar and inflation, when has this ever stopped the wealthy, right? Pritish, welcome to the Plush Podcast. Great to have you here. I've been seeing your wonderful travels of late and what you've been doing with A Travel Duet. And why don't you start off with what got you here and what exactly are you building?
Sure. Thanks, Rahul. Thanks once again for having me. Travel's been an essential part of the upbringing that I've been part of. And, when it was about the career choices that I had to make, I had a choice to either go in my family business, which was into pharmaceuticals, or else do something more exciting, which was definitely travel was one of that. My sister works with Dietary, and that's how I got the inspiration because she was always traveling and I think she had a great life and she still does. So I followed her lead and joined the travel space basically. Yeah.
I've always appreciated your take on luxury, and your nuanced take on luxury. And that probably led you to start A Travel Duet, right? So what exactly is A Travel Duet and how is it different from some of these other travel designers?
That's a great question, Rahul. I think when we started a travel brand back in 2007, it was called V3 Travels, which are our flagship travel company. And very soon I realized that if you don't specialize into something or create your own niche, regular travel brands are not going to sustain for too long,
Yeah.
And what was interesting around then was that we were servicing different segments of travelers. And one of them was honeymooners, And I think what we realized quickly is that was one segment even 10, 15 years ago was spending quite a bit on those trips compared to a family trip where after buying tickets for, let's say, 5 people within the family, there were no budgets left to do anything creative on a holiday, So I think back then we realized that let's take a step back. Let's go with the most lucrative market where there is an opportunity to be creative. That was the core goal, that we didn't want to just sell the regular mundane stuff, but we were all about experiences. And I think we saw that, if you don't have the budgets, you're not going to be able to buy unique things,
So these are not those 99,000 rupee package trips to Mauritius or Thailand for your honeymoon.
Yeah, I think that's what we pulled ourselves out of and figured that everything is bespoke and customized. And I think that is where it was more about the person traveling and their requirements, I think.
So COVID's a long foregone memory now, and Indians are traveling despite the dollar getting stronger, despite inflation, and despite that 20% TCS, which has a lot of travel designers a little, I want to say, disturbed or just a little, disappointed rather. And Indians are still traveling in hordes overseas. So what's your take on that?
I think travel has been fast-tracked due to pandemic. I think all these people who are traveling now still had the wealth back in the days. But I think COVID has definitely changed the perspective that life is short, life is uncertain.
So all of these, issues that I mentioned, a rising dollar and, inflation, when has this ever stopped the wealthy, right?
Exactly, so it was just a cautious approach back in the days.
Yeah.
But now with no guarantee on life, people are just like, we started with revenge travel, which we saw in 22, 23.
Yes.
And now things have stabilized a little bit, but people are definitely wanting to do more meaningful things, now. So they want to spend their dollars wisely and doing things that matter to them, I think.
So what are some of the trends that you're witnessing, especially among the wealthy, and how they want to travel now?
Few of the trends that have definitely changed is I think they're traveling for longer periods, I think, to an extent now. They are not shying away from spending money on things that matter to them. It's no more about just doing a London or a Paris or a New York. I mean, those are great, but there is so much more to see and explore and evolve, I think. So I think there's a lot of money going into meaningful trips. And in general, yeah, people are spending more on comfort, leisure. So where you would go with a room in a Four Seasons, they're now taking a top category suite for their comfort of their loved ones and things like that. So people are not shying away from spending big money on things that matter to them.
Right. And where are the wealthy travelers going to? Like, we know that the London and New York is always going to be, they're always going to make a pit stop in one of these destinations. But generally speaking, which destinations are the wealthy seeking out? And are there any upcoming destinations on the horizon as well?
I think we also did a deep dive into our own business and, to understand where are these people traveling. And the trend shows that out of all the countries in the world, it's the 15, 20 countries that always strike. 80% of the clientele is traveling in these 15, 20 countries, Right now, this year, last year, there is a massive demand for Italy, Switzerland, France. These are always the top guns. UK is always...
But aren't these destinations already done to death?
They are, but there's still unique things like people didn't know about Sardinia in Italy. Sardinia has all of a sudden picked up, or Corsica's picked up in France, or maybe going to Biarritz with the wine country in Bordeaux, which was not visited. So people are still okay with familiar terrain, but trying new things within those familiar terrain.
Right, because there's so much else to see besides the usual spots.
Absolutely. And there's that comfort of luxury, experiences, gastronomy, all of that comes assured when people travel to these places. And one more place is Japan, which we all know that has through the roof seen a escalation in interest from not just Indians, but globally, I think. So that's been a very big jump in the destination.
But is this beyond Tokyo and Kyoto?
That's up to us how we design the trips. I think that's a great question because I think anybody coming to India as a foreigner goes to, by and large, the Golden Triangle,
Yes.
Jaipur, Agra, Delhi.
Yes.
But do you really think that's India? Maybe not, right? There's so much more.
Absolutely.
Similarly with Japan, people go to Kyoto, Osaka, Tokyo, Nara,
Hokkaido.
The regular belt.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to see and do, and I think that is where we ourselves travel. We are always looking at unique things which are off the beaten track because you don't want to be part of the tourist trap anymore, I think.
I talked about earlier in one of my other interviews, one of my other podcasts, how the Indian traveler is influenced by their peer circle. So the typical graph, the travel graph of a traveler is they'll start first going to a Sri Lanka or a Thailand and a Dubai, then your Hong Kong, Singapore, and then London, and then New York, right? No one's going to go to Finland starting out. Now, that's a very different segment of travelers, the ones who are just starting to travel internationally. What about the wealthy? Are they influenced by their peers, or are they the kind who want to be the first ones to experience something so they can tell their peers?
So I think if we take a step back, this, the pattern that you spoke about was back in our times, I would say. Now, all these people have traveled and their kids are coming, the Gen Zs taking precedent, right? And if we look at the whole scenario, they are traveling from a young age into exotic countries from day one.
Sure.
So I think it's no more become a trend where it's a Thailand or a Sri Lanka and then Europe and then US. And
in fact, some of the kids in the West as well, and a lot of rich Indian kids who are studying in the US, come spring break, we used to go to Florida perhaps, or Myrtle Beach, or, if you're adventurous and had some money, you'd go to Cancun in Mexico. These guys are flying to, at least they used to, until recently, fly to Thailand for the full moon party. So I don't know if too many Asian kids are doing that, but definitely some of the richer kids in the West were doing that.
Again, everything is depending on interest. There are people doing all sorts of things. So that's the beauty of travel.
Yeah.
But having said that, I think the good thing is the younger generations being exposed to so many new things at such a young age that they're becoming really the global citizens.
Right.
And I think...
And are they the decision makers for their families?
I think so. Maybe I would say late Gen Z and early millennials.
Yeah.
I think these are the guys, or even millennials, these are the guys who are deciding on behalf of their family now, purely because most of them have lived abroad.
Yeah.
They've traveled extensively while living abroad. Otherwise, also they travel. And they have a pulse on what's trending, what's new. They understand brands very well. So I think they are in family travels, we are seeing that they are the ones who are taking the big shots and deciding on behalf of what might work best for the family.
I've always been curious, what's the average spend like for, let's say, a family of 4, or perhaps even, let's say, a honeymoon that some of the wealthy people go on? What kind of money are they spending?
I think we look at anything luxury has so many layers to it, right? We all understand. There's so many layers to the rich that are out there. But I think for us to qualify something into luxury, we usually look at $1 lakh per person a day as a minimum spend. So if you're doing a 20-day trip, we are broadly looking at a 20 lakh spend ahead for it to be qualifying as more or less a good quality trip.
This does not include your flights and your stay.
No, it doesn't include flights, visas, and insurance, but includes your stay experiences and your internal logistics and stuff like that. So everything on ground is included. Yes,
okay.
Per person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So they'll be probably staying at some nice, fancy, experiential resort versus staying at like a chain brand hotel, right?
I think, again, it's very personal. There's nothing wrong with either or. For us, it's more about knowing the individual and deciding based on their preferences. A lot of people are very comfortable with staying in a Four Seasons or a Ritz-Carlton or a Bulgari, whereas some are more about hyper-local experiences,
Right.
where they get a sense of a place, So I think both work for us. It's more about what they like and we work around it.
So you talked about the average spend. What about honeymooning couples? Is that a bit different than how families typically spend?
Definitely yes, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime trip. It's a very special trip in their life. I think what we always keep hearing is the wedding is with so many people within their immediate family and extended family, but the honeymoon is purely their own, like it's for the two of them. So there are a lot of aspirations attached to that trip where there's a massive wish list. There are things they wish to do with each other. Sometimes they're traveling together for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's an arranged marriage setup,
Right.
things like that. So there are a lot of considerations at play. And I think we always look at, okay, what is it that will work for the guest and then work around it, I think.
Right. Any experiences that you have planned for some of these honeymoon couples or families where the requests were a little outrageous?
I personally don't think anything is outrageous anymore. Sometimes it may be unreasonable and we are on.
Give me an example.
There is a family which had actually sent us, there was a couple actually, which had bought a very high-end house in India, And the next thing they send us is they send us the pictures of their house along with their room. And then they said, beat this.
What is so special about that room?
So it was just like, you wouldn't have seen a more opulent room anywhere in a hotel as well.
Right.
So the point they were trying to make is if my house itself is so pretty, then why do I need to go somewhere, or what else is better than that,
Right.
So sometimes it's these kind of things that we are thrown a challenge with, and we are more than happy to take it on.
So did you beat that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not that they've stopped traveling, so we managed to figure out what might work for them as well,
I also always wonder, do these wealthy people haggle when they're booking a trip with you?
I think I've always learned it the hard way that luxury is all about the best deal. It may not be the cheapest price,
Yes.
but somebody wants the best value for their money.
Yeah.
Even if a person is spending $100,000, $500,000, $500,000, but they are still looking at, is this the best deal that we can get, which doesn't necessarily equate to the cheapest price. So I do think that everybody wants the best for their buck, and I think there's nothing wrong with that,
Pritish, I want to ask you about, and I'm curious, what are some of the anecdotes where you also had to kind of chuckle that, look, this is impossible, I can't get this done? And some of these requests are really out there, out of the box. And how did you tackle those challenges?
We always talk about requests at the beginning of each trip.
Yeah.
And we highlight our guests that please give us prerequisites, if any, or non-negotiables, if any. If you don't let us know now and then later on we get to know after booking everything, then it becomes a nightmare.
Right.
Just to give you one example, very recently we had a very big family from India visiting Seychelles. We booked a 5-bedroom villa for them. Everything was done, sorted, and then there was a discussion that came around that there's no water sports here. The resorts are all eco-friendly, and Seychelles in general is a very sustainable destination, so they don't have a lot of motorized water sports. And so one of the requests was like, oh, we don't want to go here because there are no water sports, and this was discussed up front. So I think those are the kind of challenges that sometimes we are faced with, and we maneuver around it. But I definitely feel that not everything is possible in every place, and our job is to guide the guest in the right direction. Sometimes if the demands are unreasonable, we have to highlight. And we also believe that it's under promise, over deliver.
Right.
Rather than just say yes to everything and then not deliver anything.
You must have definitely come across clients who are very finicky about their diet, right? Dietary restrictions are a given, especially with certain communities who want either their Maharaj or their vegetarian food, and they're very particular. So any such requests for you as well?
Oh, I have quite a few. So one interesting one that we recently pulled off is there was a Indian family which wanted to stay in a villa in, I think, Switzerland. And because they travel in multi-gen, the parents or grandparents have a certain dietary preference. And then, of course, there are toddlers and young kids or young adults who want to eat out at Michelin and things like that, So there's a whole range within the family itself. So because they were staying there for a week, what we managed to do was the elder family member needed Indian food, vegetarian Indian food. So, and usually in the villas, they don't have it very well equipped to cook proper Indian food, with the smoke and everything, the whole villa will smell.
Yes.
Right? So we managed to have a trailer put outside with Indian food. So there were a chef and two helpers, who were cooking Indian food every day for the family, for the young ones, for the elderly. And then the young adults could go out and eat their Michelin star food and go on a food tour and things like that.
Now, all that comes at a cost, and they're willing to pay for that.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as you're able to find a solution, they are willing to work around the cost.
And money is no bar as long as they're getting the experience they want.
Yes, I think so. So that was one of them. The other incident we had is we have a family that regularly travels with us, and their requirement is they would not eat at any kitchen where beef is cooked, or not use any utensils which...
Not even use utensils.
No, not even use. So we literally have to make a makeshift kitchen for them, and all the utensils are bought for them separately, and they're okay to pay the cost for that. But it's not always possible, but we work around it in best possible manner. Yeah.
I would think that a lot of Indian travelers, after a few days, after they've enjoyed the local cuisine, a lot of them want to go back to their familiar Indian cuisine, right? And these are well-heeled people, well-traveled people, not your first-time traveler. So this is not an issue that's restricted to perhaps some of the newer travelers. This is also something that the evolved traveler wants, even when they travel overseas.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it really depends, because comfort food is comfort food. After a point, you want some curry rice or a Thai hot meal or whatever, we are used to, especially when traveling to cold places and things like that.
Right.
And I think it's fine, because usually there are cities, Indian food has become quite popular globally, that there is always an option. It may, how good it'll be, we cannot always guarantee, but there will always be an option that has become a...
I know of a group that traveled, a well-heeled group that traveled to the Northern Lights. And after the second day or the third day, they craved Maggie, hot Maggie.
Yeah. I think cold weather demands hot food. I think it's like sometimes you're just very happy eating a soup and a sandwich.
But honestly, I would love that as well.
Yeah.
I would love a hot Maggie in the Northern Lights.
Absolutely.
When I went to Antarctica, we were lucky to have an Indian chef. So I'm having butter chicken and biryani in Antarctica.
Wow.
And that was one of the requests of this travel agent, who had come to me, because I also sold that trip. And his request for his client was, we want to take the top-end suite, which is $20,000 per person. So they're willing to spend $100,000 right there off the bat, excluding flights and all of that. But they were like, we want your regular Indian roti, sabzi, dal, chawal. And I mentioned that earlier as well. So the whole trip would have gone flat for him if he did not get his cuisine.
We had a 60th birthday celebration of a family from Ludhiana.
Yeah.
And this was right before the pandemic, I think. They wanted to go see the Northern Lights. And so it was a whole extended family. And so we asked the younger kids that, what does your father like? It was his 60th, And he said, Pritish, he loves to wake up, have his paratha and chai with achar. That's his go-to meal. And to recreate this experience in a private villa in Scandinavia, is quite a challenge, So we literally, because it was a private villa which came with a chef, and our partners knew some bit about Indian food, so we sent them recipes. They did trial run with the recipes with the chef to see whether it matches the expectation or not.
Yeah.
And son carried pickles from here. And we created a experience that he still remembers. He stayed in a maybe 50,000 euro villa, but the experience that stands out is that little things that matter, right?
Right.
He was made to have what he enjoys the most.
Right.
With that view,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they get a little bit of that taste of home and that familiarity of home
Yeah.
while being in such an exotic destination. That's exactly what makes a trip a huge success, right?
We always feel it's the smaller things that count. You can always pay big money and get the big stuff. But it's the little thoughts and gestures that go a long way.
Right. Especially with someone from the older generation, perhaps. Our generation, we're a little bit more, used to more. We travel more often and we're used to different kinds of cuisines.
Right.
Not to say that the older ones aren't, but some of them do have their peculiar quirks, and they want their achar and paratha, and they want their dal chawal and all of that, right? That's so they won't be too adventurous there.
Yeah, probably. That's why we always look at the dynamics of the family and see what do we need to fix for everybody to be happy.
Yeah. Now, coming to adventure, since I mentioned adventure, is the Indian wealthy traveler adventurous? Are they willing to, partake in these adventure activities? No, I'm not talking about water sports and the banana boat. I'm talking about going, let's say, on a skiing trip. Right. A lot of them are doing so in India, in Gulmarg. Some of them I know personally, they go every year to the Courchevelles of the world in France. But generally speaking, is that a trend, or are they happy to just kind of,
I think it's fast picking up as a trend if you're into any sports. Like it could be tennis, it could be golf, it could be skiing. And people, if they have an interest, they are now finding out every year they want to find a place where they can go and enjoy that experience as a group. So that's becoming more and more popular.
Is winter tourism a thing besides going to see the Northern Lights and besides perhaps going to a ski town?
To an extent, these two things, and then there is Christmas markets.
Yes.
And then there are alpine resorts, frankly,
right,
where you enjoy a spa time or, downtime in the cold weather. So these are the 3-4 things you can do in the winters pretty much. And I think there has been a massive uptake in such trips in the last 5 years, I would say. Back in the days, we didn't find very many takers because of the extreme weathers.
Yes.
But very soon people realize that it's not about the weather, it's more about appropriate clothing. Yeah. And I think that we've been able to educate to our guests that it's never about the temperature. It's more about right quality of clothing,
I wanted to take a lot of people skiing to Austria. And I recall everybody was very gung-ho initially. But then they were like, oh my God, we don't like cold weather. So I never quite got that. And this is people like our age, in the 30s, early 40s. And I found that a little strange that someone, in our age, where I'm like, grow up, evolve, see something different, and I think you'll enjoy it. And also a lot of them were shying away from, let's say, getting on the slopes to learn skiing. So I've always wondered if they liked to actually partake in skiing or snowboarding, or are they just happy to go sit in an alpine resort?
I think everybody is willing to give it a shot. So they will try it, whether it's for them or not. They will decide once they try it. But what is nice, on the contrary, is that all young adults with young kids, let's say toddlers and stuff, are now picking this up very quickly that their kids need to start early. So we see so many families coming to us where a 3-year-old, 5-year-old is starting a ski trip for a week-long getaway and is actually learning that skill, Now, whether the parents learn it or not, but the kid is definitely going to pick that skill.
If you go to some of these IB schools, so growing up, we used to go to like a Mahabaleshwar and Mathiran for our summer camps. These kids are going to Switzerland, to Zermatt, right?
Yes,
to learn skiing, and they're spending 3-4 lakh rupees.
Absolutely.
So perhaps that's also a necessity now if they want to keep up with their peers. But you don't see the parents also wanting to learn?
So that's what, the parents sometimes try, sometimes they don't. But it's more for the kids. They'll definitely pick up a new skill.
Yeah.
And it's becoming more about that holidays are not just eating and drinking and, partying anymore. It's more about learning a new skill, or, at least with kids.
There's also some social signaling there.
To an extent, yes, I feel. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
From your experience, are any of these wealthy travelers traveling extensively within India as well? And if yes, which destinations do they normally choose?
So frankly, we've always struggled with the quality of trips in India to be as high-end as what we get outside. Even for that matter, Sri Lanka has some really high-end resorts, for example.
But India does not have that. I think the luxury travel in India would be unparalleled, but given the quality of our hotel and, hotel chains and some of these properties. But is it the last mile where we falter?
We've always struggled with the finesse that we see in India. I mean, there are great resorts and people have the right intention in terms of service. So all that is great. But we just feel that in general with India, that finesse, sometimes it's just like it's 80-90% there, and then it's that last mile where you drop, I think.
Give me an example of what you're talking about.
There are some lovely boutique resorts in India, as we know, right? But in terms of service or in terms of delivery or things, they always are not able to personalize or curate something, For example, we love curating different ideas and different experiences. But the moment we go to these resorts and stuff, they limitedly know 3-4 things and they cannot think of the 5th thing, even if we give them a brief, Whereas abroad, they are more than happy to come up with a solution. So curation takes center stage abroad, whereas over here, it's pretty much we have this, you take it, kind of a thing.
Right.
It's not going beyond what is already there.
Is it because we lack that infrastructure?
To an extent, so. Infrastructure, and also, I think hospitality is seen from a very service-focused mindset without adding layer of preemptiveness, to service, where you need to anticipate and then deliver. Whereas ours is a very bookish thing that, a guest is God and do everything for the guest, But it's sometimes people just want to step back and they want their space, but we sometimes fail to address that as well.
So if you see a luxury 5-star hotel in London versus, or any other part of Europe or the US, or, I'm not a huge fan of some of the luxury stuff in the US either, because my experience has been after traveling the world, some of the best experiences from a hospitality perspective are in Asia, right? Perhaps you disagree there.
I wouldn't really disagree. Every place has its own nuance when it comes to service and delivery. Labor being more cost effective. Of course, we can add in Asia a lot more labor.
Right.
But the moment we look at first world countries, labor is not that cheap. And hence, they don't have the bandwidth to add that many that level of people. Manpower. Having said that, what they compensate well is that preemptiveness to service, where even if it's 2 people managing a front office, but they're very sharp and very switched on, and they're able to multitask and manage everything, which sometime at our thing, there is a dedicated person doing dedicated thing.
You need 6 people to do the same task.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. But you still didn't mention some of the destinations within India where
Sure,
wealthy are
so I think safaris work very well. There are some really high-end. Sujan is a great example. Amman has some fantastic options up north. Evolve Back is a very nice brand in South. So we do have definitely some nice high-end safari getaways and stuff like that. Then, of course, beach getaways, depending on where people are, mountain retreats. So it's more about these boutique properties that are in, I think the owner of Good Earth has created a beautiful 10-bedroom hotel in Manali. It's called Sitara, So there are pockets of these high-end properties now coming through.
Sure.
And I think that has been missing all this while in India, which we are super excited about because it's not just about the big brands, but also, these secluded retreats that come up,
And that's probably been aided by the number of airports, doubling over the last decade odd. And
the regional connectivity,
better, public highways. But one of the things I'll agree with you here is that a lot of experiences are centered around top-notch properties. So outside of that, so you're almost like you want to feel like you are in a bit of a bubble.
Yes.
You're just going to that luxury property and whatever 3 or 4 experiences they can plan for you. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot going on.
True. So I think there's a very interesting shift that's happening in this space. That while I agreed with you that to an extent, a major focus is on stay, but I think now it's also become a thing that stay is a hygiene. It's a given that our stay has to be luxurious. But what beyond that is where the actual traveler is seeking for unique experiences, unique gastronomy-led things or, adventure and things like that. I'll give you one example. There's a stay outside Paris called the Grand Control. It's a Ariel's property. And they have a beautiful collection of 5 properties in France. And this property is in Versailles. So they've recreated the entire period. It's only 14 rooms. All the rooms are designed in the classic style. And they've recreated the entire period experience, So in the morning, you have somebody coming in the costume, leaving a cup of tea for you, the way they used to do with the morning call. You get private access to Versailles morning and evening. So I think there are a lot of stays which are coming out to give you that local flavor and a local experience. And I think a lot of people are now looking for such unique stays and experiences, which gives you a sense of place,
Does luxury equal opulence always? Or can an experience just be something that doesn't even cost anything, but you'll still consider it luxurious? Or is luxury different from experience?
That's a tough one because, again, it's an individual's representation of what luxury is to them, right? Like we said, for some it's stay. For a celebrity, it's just being in a place where he's not being chased and, he can just walk on the streets. That's luxury to them. So I think it's a very individualistic approach to luxury for each one of us. And I think more and more people are sure about what luxury means to them, So I think for some it's stay, for some it's experiences, for some it's eating at Michelin star, So it really is individual choice, I would say.
If you go to the Maldives, the idea of luxury is no shoes, no news. Right. And if you go to Dubai, it's bling bling, glass and steel skyscrapers. And if you go to Scandinavia, it's the complete opposite, where being one with nature and staying in an eco-friendly resort or a property, and perhaps even going down to the river and fetching your own pail of water is considered luxurious, right?
You can swim in the lake.
You can drink the water from the lake. Yeah. I did that in a place called, in a tiny village in Sweden called Grono, where you had to build your own raft and you could just set sail and go down that river. And during winter, obviously, the river is frozen, but during the summer, you can drink the water from the river. And that itself, and being in that environment and nature, when it's pin drop silence, if you just keep quiet, it's pin drop silence all around. That itself is luxury.
I always keep talking about this, that in India, we are still not familiar with the art of doing nothing.
Yeah.
Because we are so active in our lives that when we step out, we are seeking that same continuity. But if you truly look at travel, it's more about learning the art of doing nothing sometimes,
And just completely switching off.
Sometimes we have clients who book, let's say, Maldives for 5 nights or whatever, 7 nights. And then they want to plan their itinerary day-wise. And I'm like, that's a place where you just go and play it by the ear,
Yes.
There's no need to really plan much,
Yes.
But sometimes they're just like, we might miss out or we don't know.
And don't take your designer wear there because you won't be wearing it. Right. So where in India are all these wealthy people coming from? Besides your metros, are there any cities or smaller towns or pockets within India where you're suddenly seeing this uptick or surge of wealthy travelers wanting different experiences?
So I think, definitely the pattern has changed in the last 3-4 years. Just to give you a general perspective about India, I think 70 to 75% of the luxury business comes out of the north and the west. So that constitutes the major chunk of luxury travel that's happening. Now, within the whole country, there are smaller towns like Raipur has seen an uptick in travelers, like luxury travelers. Indore, Jaipur, then Surat, Ahmedabad is really high up there. Hyderabad has picked up quite a bit.
These are still probably not metros, but still, tier 2 sort of.
Kind of, yeah.
But any like smaller like villages, not
There
villages,
are places
but perhaps
like,
towns.
but that's in pockets. Like you might see somebody from a Salem in Tamil Nadu or a Kota in Rajasthan.
Okay.
There are families which are doing great things from there.
Yeah.
But these are individual instances, these wouldn't be like an everyday affair.
Right.
But major chunk, like if you look at Hyderabad as a market or you look at Surat as a market, this is where constantly people are churning, Raipur, where in big numbers people are coming out, Ludhiana, for example, so these are places where we constantly see.
They probably want to spend more money than the average person in Mumbai.
Probably,
Delhi.
yeah. I wouldn't say necessarily more than Mumbai or Delhi, but I think the fact
They have
that
the aspiration.
they have the aspiration in the past few years, we know that the whole farming community has made a lot of money in certain pockets of the country.
Right.
So there's a lot of new wealth has emerged in the last few years for number of factors. We are known and unknown,
Right.
And
But that traveler's not perhaps too evolved either, right? They have the money, but they're not evolved.
So that is always a question mark, till you don't deal with them, you don't know really whether they are evolved or not evolved, I think. So we always take it with a pinch of salt and see where they are at. And then after one trip, we know very well where they are at.
Right.
But it's always the first trip that's a defining factor for us.
How is the Indian luxury traveler different from its Western counterpart?
Few distinct traits over here. In the West, people love to read. If you see any travel agent's website or anything, they read a lot of blogs, they read a lot of content. They go very in-depth, into everything that they want to see, mostly around culture and history. Whereas in India, we are not that big of a reading community. We believe in the person, in the expert, and, let that expert guide us, with how the trip should shape and things like that. So that's one distinct difference I see. And because of that, even the requirement in the West is more about, they will not just take a guide, but they will take a specific person who has that subject expertise on the matter they are interested in. Whereas for us, we are happy with somebody who just knows or is an official licensed guide of sorts, I think.
Right.
So broadly, I feel it's more matured from that sense. And the second point, which I said earlier, is the art of doing nothing. The West can literally lie down on the beach and enjoy 15 days of doing that and reading a book. Whereas for us, we are more fast-paced. We like diverse countries, places which offer diversity in a region. That's something people, by and large, enjoy a lot.
A lot of Indian travelers, well, all of us globally, we all have bucket list trips, right? So which are some of the bucket list trips that you're saying that people are wanting to experience? Coming out of India.
I would break bucket list trip into two segments. One is the more mainstream ones, and the other one is lesser known bucket list trips, So the mainstream ones are going to be more like Northern Lights definitely is a big draw, especially now with the news that 24, 25 is going to be the best years to see the aurora.
Isn't Northern Lights already sort of done to death? Because I've been hearing about the Northern Lights for the last 7, 8, 10 years.
The quantity of accommodation is so less in these places that even if all luxury travelers go, it'll take 5-7 years to complete for all of them.
Right.
Because there's availability issues. So most of the time people are trying to finish, but there's no availability in the right places. So you're then pushed back to try it next year. So I think, so coming back to the bucket list trips, so things like Northern Lights, the migration in Kenya's Tanzania, definitely the Antarctica, Arctics, that because the ice is melting and next 10 years, we don't know where it's going to be. So those are the kind of more mainstream trips, cherry blossom in Japan. These are the trips that everybody has on their bucket list. But I also feel sometimes people are not looking at the smaller trips. It could be like there's a butterfly migration that happens in Mexico. Or
Which no one really knows about.
Yeah. Or there is the gathering that happens in Sri Lanka where 300 plus elephants come together in June, July, August in the greener pastures around Lake Mineria. And it's a sight to behold, So there are a lot of these, or I think there is the ice festival in Sapporo that happens in February.
In Japan.
In Japan. So there are a lot of these emerging boutique bucket list trips that are there on the taking. It's just that a lot of people don't know about this.
I'm surprised Rwanda is not on the list.
I think Rwanda is definitely on the list, but it's for an evolved traveler because a lot of people don't know about gorilla trekking and the significance of it still. But for those who know, they are the ones who are first in line to book it for the next year.
And these trips aren't cheap either, right?
Oh, I would say a good trip for Rwanda would be nothing less than $40,000 to $50,000 for a 4-5 night trip.
Oh, wow.
It's one of the most expensive accommodations you will find in the whole world. You're looking at anywhere between $7,000 to $9,000 a night for the accommodation. And just for the trekking itself in Rwanda, it's $1,500 a head a day just to go and trek to see the silverbacks, So I definitely think this is one of the most sought after trips. But again, the ones who are really after it know the worth of it.
So it's the same graph, right, that I mentioned earlier. First, they want to tick off the Northern Lights. They want to tick off the cherry blossoms of the world. before they head into a Rwanda.
Exactly. I mean, Africa is such an interesting space because there's just so much going on
Right.
over there. And it's a journey, right? It's like you start off with a Kenya, Tanzania, but then you evolve, or a South Africa, and then you evolve into a Botswana and Zimbabwe and Zambia. And then, you look at the gorilla trips in Rwanda and Uganda and things like that. Or Namibia is, again, a beautiful country to visit, not really for wildlife, but even for the landscapes, But not many people are fully aware of what these countries have on offer.
Right. But do you find groups who want to go there, do they just want to go there and tick the box? Or do they actually want to go and experience and really immerse themselves in it?
I think all of them are now evolved enough to go for the right reasons. They just don't want to tick the box off. I think so. Hence, it has to be an interest. We always ask people, why do you want to go there? If we don't feel that the answer is correct or it doesn't make sense for them to go, we'll always refrain them from doing that because they may not see the value of spending that kind of money on a...
So you've actually refrained someone from going to a particular destination because you think the trip would not be the right one for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Based on their
Because
personality.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they don't know about it and they just want to do it because peers are doing it, that's not really a reason. I mean, they're sure there are other trips that they can go for.
Right. So what instances, for example, you just mentioned that when have you dissuaded someone from going on a particular trip?
Something like a Botswana, like it's Okavango Delta, if you know, is one of the most unique landscapes in the world where you get to see safari on water and land both, right? But a person straight away going on to the first trip to Africa and says, I want to go to Botswana without knowing really the uniqueness of it.
Right.
We are like, okay, why don't you start off with the South Africa or Kenya, Tanzania, get a feeler of it, and then you will appreciate this better.
Right.
Because it's completely rugged, completely remote, untouched. Infrastructure-wise, it may not be as high-end as the lodges in South Africa and Kenya. But nature-wise, there are no other vehicles, You feel like true savanna experience, right? So it's really like you don't want to spend that kind of money and feel you're shortchanged on luxury or it's not for you, right?
And also sometimes getting to these destinations is difficult, right? They're not the easiest destinations to get to. So how are people flying? I mean, it's a given they're flying business class or first class, but are some of them also chartering flights?
Depends on the group size. Sometimes, yes, charters are becoming, as you said, the corporate groups and all of it. Charters have become a big part of their movements. In general, even smaller families, what we are seeing is they're very comfortable, maybe sometimes flying a business or a first on commercial airlines. But once they are within a destination, because the connectivity in regionally may not be that great, they're happy to take a short flight to different destinations, I would say.
How much would something like this cost? Like if you're
A
chartering
6
a
to 8
flight,
seater would cost you anywhere between $10,000 to $15,000 one way, and it can go up to, depending on the destination, higher as well. But I would say around $15,000 is a good starting price for a 1 hour, 1.5 hour charter inter-region.
and this is, let's say, a family of 4.
Anywhere between 4 to 6. So you can get a 7 or an 8 seater jet where you can easily do these kind of movements within 15,000.
What's the maximum amount that a client has spent with you when going on one of these trips? Including your flights, including the experiences, whether it's a charter flight.
I would say for a family of 10 or 12, I think, they've spent more than anywhere between $500,000 to $750,000 on a trip, which is a week-long trip, So you can do the equation.
Yes. Which destination was this?
This was for Japan.
Wow.
Yeah.
$750,000. So that's, at today's rates, that's about 5 or 6 crores.
Yeah.
Give or take.
Give or take.
Wow. That's a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
But that's the thing, right? Their brief was, it's not like this is the last time we're going to go to Japan. We want to bond with the family. We want to spend time with the family. So they wanted to do nice experiences, but their agenda was also to bond with each other and create memorable experiences with each other.
While depleting their bank account. Well, just to close it out, if you had to pick 3 destinations that you think are going to be really hot for the luxury traveler in the next 2 or 3 years, which ones would you pick?
Definitely Scandinavia. That's becoming more and more popular, especially with the world becoming hotter. With
Which
climate
part of
change.
Scandinavia?
Denmark for its gastronomy, and Norway with Svalbard and Greenland and not Iceland, but yeah, Greenland, Faroe Island, Svalbard, all these are emerging destinations within this region as well. So I definitely think for pure nature and, secluded beauty and stuff, I think Scandinavia definitely will be one of them. Second, I think is Seoul and Korea. Korea is emerging again as another Japan. So what Japan has seen in the last 2 years, now we've seen Korea as the next destination where this is going on. And I definitely think Africa has to be there because there's a lot of interest in Africa. I think Botswana will emerge in the next few years as another really high-end destination that a lot of Indians will travel to.
Would you not peg Patagonia in Chile, Argentina, and that region as well?
I think definitely yes. Again, that's a great region. Chile has been in South America, that has one of the most sought after destinations. It's just the distance sometimes doesn't allow. It's 30 hours of flying time and not everybody is willing to take that journey always,
We haven't touched upon Australia and New Zealand. What about those destinations? Or like, let's say Tasmania, not your regular Melbourne, Sydney, but I'm talking about Tasmania.
So I think regional travel will always pick up because people are not traveling anymore to tick off a country.
Yeah.
They're traveling to tick off a region where it's good to travel around that time.
Yeah.
So I feel there's always going to be like, whether it's Tasmania or Northern Territory or Western Australia, things like that will always be emerging now. And people will travel in the right time for the right places. So that is a trend we feel will become more relevant because it's no more about I'll do Australia and do everything at one go. I know so many people who come to India and their first trip is your regular, but after that you do a Varanasi or you do a Kerala or you do Goa, in different pockets, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I think that's the same trend we expect with luxury travelers, that they will keep doing these regional gems,
So we should watch out for Scandinavia, Seoul, and which is the last one you mentioned? Botswana, these three.
These three are my bets, for the future.
On that note, thank you so much, Pritish. It's been absolutely wonderful to learn more about how the wealthy travel and more about some of these fantastic destinations. If someone has to find you or your company, where can they find you?
travelduet.com or else /Instagram /A Travel Duet.
Thank you so much, Pritish, for joining us.
Thanks, Rahul. Thanks for having me.